Hello and welcome to India's World. Last year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi skipped the Maldives during his tour of Indian Ocean countries because India did not approve of the political environment prevailing there. India at that time was seen championing the cause of democracy in the Maldives and putting its moral weight behind ousted President Mohammad Nasheed. A year later, India has changed its policy. With former President Nasheed out of the Maldives and in London, ostensibly for medical treatment, India laid out the red carpet for Maldivian President Abdullah Yameen recently. Demands for democracy, restoration of human rights and an independent judiciary were given the go-by, and India signed 6 bilateral agreements with Maldives, including a defence pact. Prime Minister Modi even went on to describe the Maldives as amongst the closest partners of India. What led to India changing tack on Maldives? And what are the contours of this re-engagement with the island country? This is the question we are asking today. To discuss this, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, a formidable diplomat. He's been India's Foreign Secretary and Ambassador to Russia, France, Turkey and Egypt. We have with us Padma Sundarji. Ms. Sundarji is a distinguished journalist. She was the former South Asia Bureau Chief of Spiegel. She follows Maldives quite closely. And we have with us my old friend Nandan Unnikrishnan, a strategic analyst. In his last avatar, he used to be a journalist and the Moscow Bureau Chief of PTI. And now he's reincarnated himself as Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation and a senior fellow there. Nandan knows the political actors in Maldives personally and knows more about Maldives than most people in Delhi. So I welcome all of you to this discussion. Let me begin with you, Ambassador Sibal. In terms of security and strategic interests, how important is Maldives for us? And were these interests not apparent to us a year ago?
I think they were. But you know, when the country is in the middle of a political crisis, and if our Prime Minister had gone there, either his presence there produced a solution, then it would have gone to his credit. But if at the end of the day, it would have seemed like he's strengthening one side of the political equation by, in fact, endorsing in some ways politically what was happening through his presence, then it would have been a bigger setback for us and our politics and our relationship and the future. Therefore, I think he was right to skip. So I don't
hasn't he endorsed one side of the political equation by welcoming Abdullah Yameen?
There's a difference at the moment. Yes, of course, there's an internal problem, but it is not at the same level, the same acuteness and immediacy as was the case when the battles were being fought in Maldives. So I won't equate the two situations, but we can come back to that later. Maldives is strategically very important for us because in the whole Indian Ocean politics now, and we'll come back to the China thing as you said later, China's ambitions in the Indian Ocean and Maldives as a potential and a serious staging point for China's presence in this region, we cannot ignore the strategic importance of Maldives.
Padma, has India decided to adopt a more welcoming policy towards Maldives, as Ambassador Sibal suggested, because of China's increasing presence there? Because China has been wooing the Maldivians?
You know, I think as Ambassador Sibal said, I'd like to come back to China when we speak about it eventually. But
I would say, about it now also.
All right, okay. Yeah. I would say it's a more pragmatic policy overall. Whether it's the better policy or the worse, that's depends on which prism and perspective you look at it. Yeah. If you looked at it from, let's say, the prism of the UK, it would seem something disastrous because there's this whole championing of human rights in other people's countries, and notably in countries where they have strategic interests. As Ambassador Sibal pointed out, this is a very strategic area, and the Indian Ocean region...
But UK is not part of this region, so their perspective doesn't really matter.
But I'm saying that depending on which prism and perspective you look at it through, I would call it a more pragmatic policy. And at the same time, I wouldn't... And I think we're taking a firmer stand on the Maldives, which we haven't done in the past. We've dithered, several times because Mohammad Nasheed's ouster and, being practically sent off in quasi banishment to England, ostensibly for medical grounds. That's the public reason. But we have dithered on past instances when, I've been in touch with Mohammad Nasheed and with Mohammad Latif during those years in 2002, 2003. And I know that India's stand was not very clear. We were sort of tightrope walking as to whether we should support the democracy movement or we should, just say, that's none of our business, that's a domestic issue.
So, Nandan, a firmer stand, even if it is against democracy, and seen wrong by rest of the world is all right as long as it is in India's interest, is it?
No, I mean, yes, if you want to put it, is India being cynical? You could try and put that moral kind of position. But the point is, let's start from the other side. Every actor in the Maldivian scene internally has been cynical. They've been cutting deals left, right, and center. And you look at it, even Nasheed, who one has to admire for his steadfastness towards democracy. But he has cut deals left, right, and center. When he was sitting with us and we were backing him, he decided that a deal with the Vice President Adib at that point would be a better option. So he literally cut the ground from under our feet. So given that the players within Maldivian politics are trying to work out their own equations, India has to therefore look at it from the prism of national interest. And as Ambassador Sibal, I think, absolutely correctly said, this is a place of vital strategic importance for us, and we cannot afford for it to become a staging post for any other power. Let's be very clear, it should not be a staging post either for the Chinese or for the Americans or for the Brits or anyone else. It is literally, I don't like this phrase, but it's our soft underbelly and we should be playing the game.
Ambassador, so this policy shift, which all of you say is dictated by pragmatism and strategic interests, so has it triumphed over Malay's record of democracy, human rights, and the failure of law and order situation there? We are saying it's all right if you make a mess within your country, provided you don't mess with our strategic interests.
Two things. Firstly, I don't think there's been any shift in policy. As I said, Prime Minister at that time skipped Maldives for practical reasons, and it was the right decision to take. Our policy cannot shift, because Maldives is far too important for us strategically to waver in terms of our core strategic position vis-a-vis our interests in Maldives. Number two, I'm not at all in favor of bandwagoning with the West on this issue of democracy. We've lived with lack of democracy in Pakistan for 70 years. In Bangladesh, we've lived with lack of democracy. In Nepal, we've lived with lack of democracy. Bhutan, fortunately, for them, they moved towards democracy, but we had excellent relationship with the monarchy. We were not pressing for any democratic change. So why in the case of Maldives we should suddenly say that democracy is very important to us? I think we should pay far more attention to managing our democracy at home.
I say this only because earlier you was talking about democracy.
No, we look at Myanmar. Initially we made this mistake of wanting to promote democratic forces and protecting them politically. And we lost ground tremendously to our cost until we realized that this was a self-defeating policy.
So we don't want the same mistakes in Maldives?
It's not a mistake. We should not make the same mistake in Maldives by thinking that we are in the West or we are America or we are UK and we can take a distant view. Right. We have to take a very close view of what our interests are and leave this moral dimension of democracy, which is all selective and based on double standards, out of our political equations.
All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing India's recalibrated policy towards Maldives. Padma, President Yamin openly and publicly thanked India for its role in the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group, or CMAG. Now, at a meeting in London on 20th April, these representatives of Commonwealth countries expressed concern over the continued misuse of anti-terrorism legislation in Maldives, and there being little or no evidence of substantive progress in promoting freedom and space for civil society. Now, India is an important member of this Commonwealth grouping. Does President Yamin's praise for Indian help in CMAG mean that India actually took a position which was different from that of other members and does not share the concern of this group? And if we don't share the concern of this group, why on earth did we decide to become a member of this group? Don't go there. Say that, look, our interests are different. We don't want to be part of it. You go ahead and do whatever you want to do. You're a Commonwealth grouping and you don't understand this region.
I think India is doing the right thing, because this whole question of, the West trying to, all these groups, I mean, the European Union, the Commonwealth, when they speak of democracy, the tenets of democracy, it's usually always the tenets of democracy in somebody else's country, and I don't think, and I'm a firm believer that you cannot just pick up the Western role of model of democracy and impose it on any society.
Nandan, what has China done in Maldives that has really upset us? And is it possible to neutralize at this late stage the influence of China in Maldives? Because Maldives has enthusiastically joined the maritime Silk Route. It's offered a very important island which has a long name, I-Haven Dipolu or I-Haven, which is closest to India, where China is expected to set up a military base.
Well, first, let's go to the Commonwealth thing. You see, if Yamin's visit to India preceded the 20th April resolution, when he praised us, obviously what the Commonwealth said was very important to him, whatever it said prior to his visit. So therefore, for us on the 20th to join the resolution, I think is a good thing because we are keeping pressure on him. And he genuinely is using all kinds of anti-terrorism laws.
But he had inside information that we had actually spoken on his behalf.
I don't know because I don't have that.
So otherwise, how would he praise India for its role in
But
CMAC?
if I have to take it at face value, I have to see that the 20th April resolution, our foreign secretary was there, and so I assume we are fully party to whatever is written there. I can't say that we actually really have a separate position, but we did something else. So
we're playing both sides. But
you're not playing
China?
both sides, but I think you're telling Yamin that we are not completely given up on democracy, as you put it earlier, but that we would like you to restore law and order and proper democracy as time goes by. But coming to China now, I think China is interested in spreading its tentacles everywhere in the Indian Ocean. It's not only Maldives. They are close touch with Sri Lanka. They are close in touch with Mauritius. Pakistan, of course, less said the better probably. So we are clearly not in agreement with China's interests in the Indian Ocean. And given our level of engagement with countries like Sri Lanka, Mauritius and all, so naturally there will be a conflict of interest. The Chinese, I think, so far have not shown the ability to develop a military base in the Maldives. And what we are trying to do today as a policy, I assume, is governed by the fact that we would like that to be prevented at any stage and at any level. We would not like them to get those. But the Chinese are already there with several development projects. They have linked Malé to the island of the airport through a bridge. They've also set up some housing societies which are playing an important role. And of course, China never does anything for charity. Let's be very clear about that. They are clearly driven by their national interest. So clearly they are expecting to get something out of it.
Well, let's discuss this China thing a bit. One, why is China always an octopus with tentacles? And we are people with, we're good human beings, no tentacles. They work, in their national interest by doing development projects. And, we seem to be doing it for charity. Why convert China in the game of real politics into a monster or an animal and say that, we are better? What sense does it make?
We are not protesting about China's relationship with the United States or Central Asia or Japan or Korea. I'm talking the trading relationship, or Southeast Asian countries or Africa or Latin America. It is only when they come close to us then we begin to worry, because we have to see whether what they are doing on the economic development front in our neighboring countries is part of their larger strategic goals in the region, in line with their new defense white paper, where they have clearly said that they are going to expand the remit of the Chinese Navy, and it will protect China's sea lanes of communications and this and that. Now, if you look at that, sea lanes of communication, which are the critical points on the Indian Ocean map, where they need to position themselves to make sure that these sea lanes are protected. And then you come to the obvious conclusion that Maldives is very important. Now, China, which has got such a massive economic relationship with various parts of the globe and major countries, why should they pick up on a small country like Maldives and expend so much capital, political, economic and others, Xi Jinping coming there, development projects, 700,000 tourists apparently come from China, etc., etc. There is a big design behind this, and we have to be very careful about this and constantly keep our relationship with Maldives in such a way that they know very clearly what our mind is and don't take any undue risks where we may be forced to react. And that's why this base business, I don't think is for tomorrow. And if Maldives took that step, I think they would realize there will be strong repercussions.
Okay, that's very well analyzed. Padma, during his recent visit to Delhi, President Yamin has apparently either offered space for India on the same island or in an island in the same atoll for setting up a special economic zone. Now, would that help India in any way? Should we set that up? Is it in India's interest?
You know, I don't know whether it's going to be in India's interest or not, but then if we were to think like China, and as Ambassador Sibal once again pointed out, you know, it may be, why would China be interested in this little archipelago down there? It's not that little, it's spread across 90,000 kilometers, square kilometers. But for strategic reasons. I mean, if we had any sense, one of the things that President Yamin has also announced is that he intends to liberalize, or he has already liberalized land sales. So that is another thing that the Chinese are looking at, you know, in combination with their own soft loan policy, you know. So what the Chinese have been doing, especially in these, in the Indian Ocean, which is very important from the energy point of view, as you know, because 80% of China's and India's energy needs are shipped through the Indian Ocean. So, in fact, all the other powers, we spoke of the UK earlier on. I mean, you know, there are two things that concern them, and those are their primary interests. One is the so-called alleged rise of Islamic fundamentalism, which stems basically from President Yamin's increasing closeness to Saudi Arabia. He visited it 3 times within 2 years. That's one reason. But the other very, very important reason is that everybody wants to, in case of, you know, times of conflict, want to be able to have control over their energy supply. That's one of the... So if India, talking about the SEZ, whether it actually, you know, gives us any kind of economic benefits or not, I think from the strategic point of view, if we are really to compete with China, it might be wise to look at it from that point of view.
All right. We need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing India's emerging policy towards Maldives. Nandan, in your view, has the Maldives government become more accommodative of opposition political parties? After all, former President Nasheed was allowed to go off to London. I'm sure they were also wary of whether he was really in need of spinal surgery or whether he was just going away. And after that, President Yamin has offered dialogue to the opposition political parties. So is the internal politics changing in Maldives?
Well, I don't think Yamin is doing this out of goodwill and because he wants to restore democracy. He is primarily interested in retaining power, and he's discovering that some of, I mean, there is a strong pushback on his attempts to retain power through authoritarian means, by putting his vice president in jail, by slapping cases against judges and, you know,
putting journalists in jail.
Yeah, putting journalists in jail. So, he also realizes that he has to make attempts to assuage this opposition to his policies. So these are part of that. I do not personally think that Maldives is back on the way to democracy at this point of time. But I think we should apply whatever pressure we can, whether through the Commonwealth Group and others, to get that project going back, get it back on its feet. The other thing is that what I was saying earlier is that, you know, all over the world, and this is not about Maldives alone, the Chinese outreach through its economic activity is not benign charity.
Of course it
China
isn't.
is looking at subsequently
But nor is our economic activity benign
I'm not for
charity.
a moment saying that we are benign. No, not at all. But all I'm saying is that they are, in a classical Marxist manner, they are looking at translating economic influence into political influence at the subsequent stage. Our interest in the long term is not necessary. After all, China is today our primary strategic enemy. Whether we like it or not, that's a fact, right? So therefore, we have a conflict of interest in...
Absolutely, but they've been cleverer than us and more focused than us.
They have more money than us. They are not necessarily cleverer
Well,
than us.
we did that for a year. We wasted precious time. But really, I want to discuss the internal politics. In view of what Nandan said, is it unreasonable of the opposition, especially the Maldivian Democratic Party and the Adalat Party, to refuse to join the dialogue, saying that till you release our leaders, till you release all the political prisoners, we will not negotiate with you? And how can they you have to negotiate as with a certain degree of freedom.
You know, I have a different view of these things. Now, we have our internal politics in India, which is highly divisive, fractious, and it's so complex. Now, if we had external powers, or the United States, let's say the rapport India, Maldives is not quite the same as US, India, but let's say US, Europe, India, still not quite, but still. Supposing they were to start looking at how our internal politics is managed, and what should the government do to accommodate the opposition, and what should the opposition do, we would say, what the hell is happening? I think it's unfair to target small countries like that.
I'm not targeting. I'm
targeting.
merely saying that we must understand their
I'm
politics.
not-
If Maldives is not stable, your best policies will not function.
I'm not. At the end of the day, you can't manage internal politics. The reason why they are in this mess is because they can't manage their internal politics. They've been used to absolute power under Gayoom for decades. So they don't have a democratic culture. Yes, they have now become more democratic. There are several political parties, and there's much more liberty than before. And that is adding to the complexity of the situation. But for us to think that we can give advice. If they seek our help, we can give them. If they need some constitutional advice, we can give them, etc., etc. I think our High Commissioner there should be very active in terms of meeting all the sides, building trust and confidence, acting as some kind of a mentor under direction of a central government, the government in Delhi. These are the sort of things we should do. But to enter too much into the details of what is happening and the levels at which compromises should or should not be made is an exercise that we won't
Well,
succeed
degree
in
we can talk
achieving.
about, but if we had not, I mean, see what a mess we made of Nepal by first intervening and then saying we'll keep away and then again approaching them. So I'm saying that
Nepal
at
has
some
always
level you
been a
have
mess.
to engage with the
But
internal
Bharat,
politics
Nepal
of the
has
neighbors.
always been a mess, and our relations with Nepal has always been difficult, no matter what the political party in power.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. But Padma, is Islamic fundamentalism growing in the Maldives, and is that of concern? There have been reports that about 80 to 120 Maldivian fighters are active with the ISIS, and this for a population of only 3 lakhs is a huge number. Only last week, 12 Maldivians, including some women, were apparently transited through Bangalore to Istanbul, ostensibly once again to join the ISIS. The Indian intelligence was following them, the US intelligence had information about them, but we could do nothing to prevent it. So is this a matter of concern?
It is certainly a matter of concern if the fundamentalist form of Wahhabi Islam grows anywhere in the region, and it is further a matter of concern if it becomes a threat, a direct threat to India itself. So of course it's a matter worth watching, but on the other hand I'd like to point out that the Maldives, one of the reasons why we can afford to be a little more pragmatic about the Maldives is not Pakistan. The Maldives has been under President Gayoom's 3-decade-long quasi-dictatorial rule, but let's not forget that those 3 years, I mean, have you, Bharat, you hardly heard of any kind of, I mean, right next door you had a 30-year civil war in Sri Lanka, a brutal civil war. You haven't seen that kind of phenomenon in the Maldives in the last 30 years. It may, you know, so there is
was a
something
coup
to be said.
attempt where
No,
we went
hang on.
and helped
So,
them.
you know, talking about, talking about Islam and Islamic fundamentalism, I think the Maldives themselves have been pretty pragmatic in the sense of, you know, their whole economy depends on tourism, and their tourism policies have been extremely liberal from the point of view of Islam, conservative Islam. So yes, it's worth watching and we must watch it, but you know, the Maldives is not Pakistan.
Okay, so you know, so if Maldives, because of its education system, closeness to Saudi Arabia, if there's growth of Islamic fundamentalism, we should keep away because it's an internal matter. And we did not keep away when there was a coup attempt against Gayoom with mercenaries. We actually sent our army. So I don't understand this business of keeping away from internal politics of other countries and then also sending in an army to prevent a coup, to save a dictator, and being concerned about Islamic fundamentalism but saying we should do nothing. It's not Pakistan.
I think you're trying well to provoke me, but
I didn't say, by the way, I didn't say we should do nothing.
So what should we do?
I said we should. It's certainly worth watching, but at the same
Okay,
time,
but
one
doing
cannot
nothing.
compare. One cannot say that the threat to
Okay,
India
quickly, but
from the Maldives is as big as
Nandan,
Pakistan.
quickly.
no, I think one is that Islamic fundamentalism is a danger. We must take a very close look at what is happening, because there is always another danger which is there, that Maldives, as you pointed out earlier, has this fractious democracy. But also must remember one thing: there are only 3 lakh people, so the elite is very, very thin, and they're all intertwined, whether they're in opposition or not. So the basic factor is, I am worried that at some point those who are ruling may decide to use Islamic fundamentalism to further legitimize their rule. And it has happened across the globe.
Okay.
And
So
we will be in
last
trouble.
word to you, because I was not trying to provoke him, I was trying to provoke you.
No, I think what you said about at points we intervene, at points we stay away, and we take different positions, all this is a function of a very complex relationship we have with our neighbors. And you cannot have a linear kind of a policy.
Fair enough.
Number 2, Islamic fundamentalism is a problem if it takes stronger root, and it has pretty strong roots in Maldives. It is a potential problem for us, and therefore our intelligence agencies have to keep a very close watch, and we should have an effective mechanism for cooperating with Maldives on this question and push them in that direction, because the fallout of this is pretty problematic for us in southern India, in even Sri Lanka.
We've really
etc.,
run out of
etc.
time.
Just one word, de-radicalization. It is important not only for Maldives, but even internally.
Oh, absolutely.
We should work at that.
Absolutely. We have different kind of radicals in 2 countries. But thank you very much, Nandan, Unnikrishnan, Padma, Sundarji, Ambassador Kanwal, Sibal, for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Till then, goodbye, and thanks for watching India's World.